It was 2347, but something was very wrong. Doctor Sarah Chin watched her screen with growing horror from the observation deck of the temporal monitoring station, which orbits Earth. The world below blinked like a light bulb that was about to go out. She saw shining cities that stretched across continents for a moment. In the next moment, those same pieces of land were covered in primitive forests. Then smoke from factories. Then there are crystalline spires that shouldn't be there for another 100 years. She whispered, "This can't be happening," and her hands shook over the controls. Marcus Webb, her co-worker, ran to her side. "The readings on the timeline are going crazy. We are seeing changes in time that are plus or minus 300 years. Sarah, if this keeps up..." "I know," she said, cutting him off. "Reality itself will fall apart." A salvage crew had found something 3 days earlier that would change everything. Captain Rodriguez and his crew were sweeping the temporal anomaly zone, a part of space where time didn't move normally, when their sensors picked up a huge signal. Amy Park, his navigator, said, "Captain, you need to see this. There's a boat out here." A big one. That they saw her through the viewport. The Kronos, a luxury starliner that had disappeared 40 years ago during humanity's first experiments with time travel technology. She floated silently, her hull twisted and scarred, surrounded by a field of distorted space-time that sparkled. Rodriguez said, "That's not possible. The Kronos was broken. That's something everyone knows." But there she was, and inside her broken hull was a fully functional temporal displacement drive, which was both the best thing humanity had ever done and the worst thing that could happen. The salvage team had towed the Kronos back to the nearest station, eager to get the reward for finding such an important piece of history. They had no idea what they had let loose. The time problems started just a few hours after the ship got there. First, little things like clocks running backwards, coffee cooling before it was poured, and people remembering things that hadn't happened yet. Then bigger problems. Buildings would change between different styles of architecture. A child would get 10 years older in 10 seconds, then go back to being a child. The best scientists at the Temporal Authority looked at the drive and were scared by what they found. The device wasn't just broken, it was actively breaking the rules of cause and effect. It sent out waves of time chaos every second it was unstable. These waves spread like cracks in glass and threatened to break the whole timeline. Dr. Helena Morse, the head of the Temporal Authority, stood in front of the Emergency Council with a serious look on her face. She was a woman who never showed fear, but today her voice trembled. "The temporal drive works on ideas that we don't really get," she said. "It's linked to what we call the chronal substrate, which is the basic structure of time itself. The problem has caused a feedback loop. The drive is literally changing history, but not in a consistent way. The timeline will fall apart completely if we don't stop it in 7 days. The past, present, and future will all come together in a mess. Humanity as we know it will no longer be." "What do we need to do?" asked Counselor Zhang, an older man with gray hair and a pale face. "We need to recalibrate the drive, make sure its connection to the chronal substrate is stable, and turn it off safely. But we have a problem." Helena pulled up a holographic display that showed the drive's internal structure, which was so complicated that it was impossible to understand. "This technology is 40 years ahead of what we know now. It uses quantum mechanics that we haven't found yet, works on mathematical principles that aren't in any books, and needs to be changed at scales that are hard for us to measure." Counselor Martinez said, "So send in your best engineers." Helena's face got darker. "We did. 3 groups. 12 of the smartest people we know. They all failed. 2 of them are now in temporal stasis, which means that their personal timelines got so messed up that they are aging both forward and backward at the same time. The others gave up and said the job was impossible." The room went quiet. "What do you suggest then?" Zhang asked in a low voice. Helena took a big breath. "There's one person who might be able to do this. But you won't like it." "Who?" "Jax Miller." The name hit like a bomb. Several council members gasped. "Not at all," Martinez said angrily. "That man is a shame. He caused the destruction of the Perseus station." Helena said, "He saved 12,000 lives on that station. Yes, the station was lost, but everyone thought those people were dead. Jax got them out in ways that no one else would have thought of. Methods that broke every safety rule we have. And they worked." The argument went on for an hour, but in the end, desperation won. They had no choice because there were only 6 days left before the whole timeline fell apart. They needed someone who could do the impossible, work miracles, and fix things that couldn't be fixed. They needed Jax Miller. Jax Miller lived in a cargo container that had been turned into a home on the edge of New Denver, far from the shiny towers in the city center. He looked older at 38. His brown hair had premature gray streaks in it, and his green eyes had dark circles under them that never went away. But those eyes still had a spark of fierce intelligence that no amount of shame could put out. Jax was in his workshop, elbow deep in the guts of a broken atmospheric processor when the official transport got there. His office was a mess, with old combustion tools hanging next to quantum welders, holographic displays flickering next to hand-drawn sketches, and half-empty coffee cups balanced on stacks of technical manuals written in 6 different languages. Jax Miller? The officer at his door looked uncomfortable, as if he wanted to be anywhere but there. Jax didn't look up from what he was doing. If you're here to arrest me again, I've already paid that fine. The hover truck was about to blow up. I had to turn it off, even though it was parked in a government area without permission. Don't worry, I'm not here to arrest you. The temporal authority needs your help. That made Jax stop. He put down his fusion torch and turned around, wiping the grease off his hands. The authority of time? The same people who took away my engineering license and said I was a dangerous liability? Yes, sir. You need to fix the Chronos temporal drive for them. Jax laughed, but it was a bitter, tired sound. Of course they do. Let me guess, their best people couldn't figure it out? 3 teams failed, sir. And now they come crawling to the disgraced engineer. Jax shook his head. Hey, you know what? Say no to them. Tell them I told them they could figure it out on their own. The officer moved around uncomfortably. Sir, if you don't help, the timeline will completely fall apart in less than a week. Everyone you know and everyone who has ever lived is gone. Jax looked at him for a long time. He then cursed under his breath and put on his coat. Jax looked over the information on his handheld while flying to the Temporal Authority headquarters. As he read more, his stomach sank more and more. The temporal drive wasn't just hard to understand, it was also beautiful, scary, and never been done before. The person who made it was a genius. Someone who let it break was an idiot. He said, "This is crazy. Just the quantum entanglement would need." He stopped for a moment, his fingers flying over the numbers. Oh no. They used chronal anchors with reverse polarity. That's great, but it's not stable at all. Dr. Helena Morse met him in person at headquarters. She was in her 50s and had sharp features and even sharper eyes. Years ago they had met at a conference. After the Perseus incident, she was one of the few people who stood up for him. "Thanks for coming," she said simply. "I haven't said yes to anything yet. Show me the drive." They brought him to a safe place where the Chronos had been moved. The ship was in a huge containment field which was full of sensors and other monitoring tools. Jax could still feel something was wrong even through the shielding. It was like reality itself was a little off-key. The engineering bay on the ship was mostly taken up by the temporal drive. It was a 10-meter-wide sphere of crystal metal held up by a frame made of unknown alloys. Light moved in strange ways around it, bending and pooling in ways that made it hard to look at. There were glowing equations that Jax could kind of understand and kind of not on its surface. 3 engineers in protective suits stood close by, looking tired and defeated. One of them, a young woman named Riley Santos, looked hopeful when she saw Jax. "You're Jax Miller? The person who fixed the impossible reactor breach on Titan Station?" "That's me. How did you do it?" "We looked at your approach for months and still couldn't understand what you were thinking." Jax walked slowly around the temporal drive, taking in every detail with his trained eye. "I used a pattern of musical resonance to keep the plasma flow steady. Turned a trumpet into a modulator of frequency." Riley blinked. That shouldn't work." But it did. Jax crouched down and looked at the base of the drive, where wires went into the ship's structure. "Because I didn't think about what should work. I thought about what the problem really needed." He stood up with a serious look on his face. "This is worse than I thought. The drive isn't just broken, it's stuck in a loop that keeps repeating itself. It's trying to fix itself, but every time it does, it makes things worse because it's using information from the future to fix mistakes from the past, which changes the future and the information it's using." "We know," Dr. Morse said softly. "That's why our people didn't succeed. They couldn't get out of the loop." Jax was quiet for a long time. His mind was already racing through options, throwing out the usual ones and looking for the unusual one that might work. He finally said something. "I'll do it. But I work alone and no one questions how I do things, no matter how crazy they seem to me." "Agreed," Helena said right away. "And when this is over, I want my engineering license back. Full reinstatement with all records erased." "Finished." Jax slowly nodded, still looking at the machine that couldn't be real. "Okay then. Let's save the world." The time anomalies were getting worse every hour. Tom Fletcher, a businessman in downtown New Denver, stepped out of his office building at noon and found himself standing in the same spot, but the building was gone and the prairie was open. He could see his office through a wall of distorted air that shimmered. His co-workers were moving in fast forward while he stood in 1823. Then reality hit him and he fell into the present, his heart racing. Lisa Chin, a museum curator in the city, watched in horror as ancient artifacts she was in charge of flickered between being in perfect condition and falling apart, going through centuries in seconds. The vase, which was 1,000 years old, broke, fixed itself, and then broke again. There were 5 different versions of a painting that were impossible to see at the same time. Dr. Kevin Morris tried to help a patient at a hospital who kept changing ages. One moment they were a child, the next they were an old person, and then they were a young person again. As he watched, her medical history changed on his screen, showing diseases she had never had and surgeries that had not yet been done. The world was falling apart. Jax had been working for 18 hours straight inside the containment facility. The way he set up his work area made the official engineers shake their heads in disbelief. Old oscilloscopes were next to quantum computers. There was a violin hanging on a rack next to some plasma welders. There were hand-drawn diagrams all over the place, and red thread connected them all like a detective's conspiracy board. At 20 hours, Helena checked on him. She saw him sitting on the floor with his legs crossed and 17 different clocks around him, all showing different times. "What are you doing?" she said. "Listening," Jack said without looking up. "The drive has a beat. Every time it makes a time anomaly, it follows a certain pattern. I'm making a map of them. Our sensors already did that. Your sensors took their measurements. I'm paying attention to them." He pointed to the clocks. "There is a micropause every 7 seconds. That's the drive trying to line up with the real world. It wants to stabilize, but it can't because its internal reference frame is broken." Helena sat down next to him and suddenly got it. "You're not just looking at this as a mechanical issue. Because it isn't. This drive is half math, half machine, and half art. That's 3 halves. Jack smiled a little. "That's right. Part of it is outside of normal reality. That's why standard methods don't work. You can't fix it by thinking in a normal way." He got up and walked to his wall of diagrams. "Hey, I call the connections between different moments time bridges. That's how the temporal drive works. It's not really moving through time. It's making connections between points and letting things slide along those connections. We knew that much. But what you didn't know is that something like musical harmony keeps those connections going. Harmonics in time. Time flows smoothly when the frequencies are in sync. When they don't," he pointed to the monitors that were flickering and showing strange things happening around the world. "You get this mess." Helena leaned in, interested even though she was tired. "So, how do we fix the harmonics?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out. There are 17 major frequency bands on the drive, and each one corresponds to a different time layer. They're all out of order. I need to find the master frequency, which is the basic tone that everything else is based on, and then I need to recalibrate from there." Jax used methods that would have gotten him kicked out of any good engineering program over the next 12 hours. He put a tuning fork inside the containment field to measure vibrations that were in sync with each other. He played different musical notes through speakers aimed at the drive and watched how the temporal field reacted. He even started humming while he worked, which completely confused Helena. He said that the complicated, changing melody helped him feel the patterns of time. But it was working. He was starting to understand the drive's internal logic, even though it was impossible. Then at 32 hours, disaster struck. Jax was deep inside the ship's maintenance tunnels, following the power lines for the drive, when an alarm went off. The temporal field spiked violently, and he was suddenly in a different place. He was still in the same tunnel, but the ship around him was brand new. He saw Earth through a window, but it wasn't right. The continents were not in the same place. The moon appeared bigger. This is what Earth looked like millions of years ago. The scene changed after that. He was still in the tunnel, but the ship was now old, rusty, and dead. He could see a red sun dying through the window. Another change. Half of the tunnel was built, and construction tools were floating in space. People came and went around him. Jax's mind was racing, but he made himself stay calm. This was a temporal echo. He was living through different times on the ship's timeline at the same time. He shut his eyes and thought about his own present and his own timeline. He thought about Helena, who was waiting for him. About the world outside and how much they need him. Reality slowly became stable. He was back in the present, shaking and gasping. Helena knew something had happened as soon as she saw him come out of the tunnels. His eyes looked like they were haunted. "I saw it," he said in a low voice. The whole history of the drive. Its making, its breaking, and the futures that might happen. Helena, the people who made this knew it would fail. They knew, but they built it anyway. Why would they do that? Jax pulled up a holographic display that showed a complicated map of time. Because it had to fail. This problem, this crisis, it's not an accident. That's a test. Is it a test? For whom? His eyes were haunted as he looked at her. For anyone who wants to fix it. For people. To find out if we're ready for technology that changes time. We can handle time itself if we can figure this out. If we can't. He didn't have to finish. Helena felt a shiver go down her back. Then we should do well on the test. There are 72 hours left until everything falls apart. Jax stood in front of the temporal drive with a device that looked like it had been put together by a crazy person. Because, in a way, it had been. The thing had a clarinet, 3 quantum processors, an 1800s metronome, and what looked like a modified car battery. There were tubes of glowing liquid that linked different parts, and the whole thing made a strange humming sound. Riley Santos, one of the official engineers, couldn't help it. What is that supposed to do? It's a temporal harmonics calibrator, Jax said as he made the last changes. The clarinet makes exact acoustic frequencies. The quantum processors turn those frequencies into waves in time. The metronome keeps a steady beat, and the battery, well, the battery just powers the whole thing. That's not scientific at all. Science is just a way of saying what works. This will work. We hope. Jax turned on the device. The clarinet started to play on its own. No person could have made such a complicated, quickly changing melody. The notes looked like ripples of distorted light that hung in the air. The sound waves that hit the temporal drive made the chaotic equations on its surface slow down and start to make sense. It's working. Helena said, as she looked at her screens. Temporal variance is going down by 3%. 5%. Jax, it's working. Then the drive thumped, and the harmonics calibrator blew up in a shower of sparks. As parts fell from the sky, Jax dove for cover. After the smoke cleared, he sat up, angry but not broken. Okay. The way you went about it was right, but the drive is too strong. I need something bigger. For the next 24 hours, Jax worked so hard that it was almost obsessive. He hardly ate, didn't sleep, and talked to himself all the time, working through problems out loud. His next step was to reprogram 17 industrial fabricators to make a network of crystalline tuning rods. He put these in a certain geometric pattern around the drive, which he said looked like something called a coronal resonance lattice. You're making this up, Riley said, but she was still helping him put the rods in place. She had become his unofficial assistant because she was so interested in how he thought outside the box. Half making up, half remembering, Jax said. I saw something in the temporal echo that reminded me of the people who made the drive. They used the rules of sacred geometry. Patterns that repeat on different scales, from the quantum level to the cosmic level. This lattice should make vibrations that are sympathetic to. The drive pulsed again, but this time it was stronger. The world changed. For 3 seconds, Jax and Riley were in more than one time period at the same time. Jax saw Riley as a kid, an old woman, and as a version of herself that had never been born. He thought he would succeed, fail, or die trying. There was an overlap between every possible timeline. Then it went back. They both fell down, confused and scared. What was that? Riley gasped. The drive's way of protecting itself. It's keeping itself safe from outside forces. Jax's thoughts were racing. That means we're going in the right direction. It wouldn't defend itself if we weren't threatening its current state. 48 hours left. Things were getting worse and worse all over the world. Cities were going through time changes all at once. Paris had both medieval buildings and futuristic spires. People in Tokyo got older and younger at random times. Dinosaurs showed up and then disappeared in rural areas, or buildings from hundreds of years in the future showed up and then disappeared. The temporal authority was in a state of emergency. Helena answered calls from world leaders who were in a panic while trying to give Jax the time he needed to work. But everyone knew that time was running out. Jax's third try was the first time anyone had ever tried quantum entanglement on such a large scale. He made pairs of particles that were entangled in time, meaning they were linked not in space but in time. Theoretically, he could change the drive's past state by changing particles in the present, fixing the original problem before it got worse. He set up the equipment and said, "This is either brilliant or really dumb. Why not both?" Riley said something and Jax laughed even though things were tense. The process of entanglement needed to be very exact. Jax worked with particles so small they were almost not real, using tools made for making things on an atomic scale. He was so tired that his hands shook, but he stayed focused. 3 hours into the process, it looked like success was close. The time readings were becoming more stable. The equations on the drive were rearranging themselves into patterns that made sense. Then a man named Brad who worked as a technician thought the power coupling was out of alignment and tried to fix it. The feedback came right away and was terrible. The temporal field turned inside out. For a terrible moment, time went backwards in the containment area. The equipment put itself together. Coffee jumped back into pots from cups. Words that were spoken a few seconds ago went back into mouths. Jack saw it happening and acted on instinct. He grabbed 2 power cords that shouldn't have been connected and slammed them together. This made a huge electrical surge that shocked the system back into the present. The containment field got stable again, but the damage was already done. It took weeks of planning, but it was all over in seconds. Jack stood there, holding the still sparking wires, with smoke rising all around him. For a brief time he looked completely defeated. Then Riley noticed that his face had changed. The loss turned into a strong will to win. "Get out, everyone," Jack said quietly. "What?" Helena got closer. "Jax. Everyone out. No. I have to work by myself and I have to do something very risky. I can't let you, Helena." Jax turned to look at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her stop arguing. He had the look of a man who had found the answer and knew how much it would cost. "I know what I need to do. But it means changing time on a personal level. I have to go directly into the temporal field." The room was quiet. Riley whispered, "That's suicide. The stress of time would tear you apart. Not if I do it at the right time. Not if I join the flow of time instead of fighting it." Jax smiled with a grim look on his face. "I saw how the original engineers built this drive. They didn't stay outside of it. They synced with it and became fluid in time themselves. You saw that in a 3-second echo," Helena said in protest. "You can't make a plan based on. This is all we have. Helena, you have 36 hours until you fall apart. There is no other way." Helena nodded after a long, painful silence. "Clear the building. Jax is on his own. There are 36 hours left." Jax stood alone in the containment chamber looking at the temporal drive. He had taken everything out of the room except for the bare necessities and one strange addition, a collection of personal items. A picture of his mom and dad. A watch from when he was a kid that doesn't work. He won a medal in his first engineering competition. Things that were important to him and helped him remember who he was at all times. "Okay, Jax," he said to himself. "Let's do something really dumb." He started by shutting down the containment field in stages, which slowly exposed him to the time distortions. Right away his perception began to break up. He saw himself from a moment ago and a moment ahead, as well as many versions of himself that were all happening at the same time. A lot of people would have freaked out. Jax took slow breaths and accepted that he was confused. He thought about the present moment, the one where his heart was beating steadily and he knew what he was supposed to do. The temporal field welcomed him like a swimmer welcomes water. All of a sudden Jax was in 17 different time streams. He was working on the drive now, yesterday, tomorrow, and next week. In each timeline what he did affected the others, which led to a chain reaction of coordinated work. Using a modified electric guitar, he changed the quantum strings frequency in one timeline. The sound waves moved through time. 3 hours earlier he felt those ripples and used them to help him make his first diagnosis, which saved him a lot of time. In a timeline 5 hours ahead, he finished a very important repair that made the foundation stable for all of his other work. Working across time didn't mean working faster. It meant working in all directions. Instead of being rules, cause and effect became suggestions. Jax planted seeds of solutions in the past that would grow into flowers in the future. He also picked results from tomorrow to use today to fix problems. He had to stretch his mind to fit this new point of view. It should have made him crazy. Maybe it would later. But for now he rode the waves of time with great focus. The main problem with the drive showed itself over time, like a flower opening. The original engineers made a beautiful paradox. The drive needed power from the future to work in the present, but the future it drew from depended on choices made in the present. It was a snake eating its own tail, a stable loop, until something broke it. That disruption was always going to happen. This crisis happened because the drive was meant to break down. What Jax thought was a test. But there was something else going on. A message hidden in the way the problem works. As Jax worked through the timelines to find the answer, words from the people who made the drive came to him. If you can read this, you've proven worthy. Time is not a river that can be dammed. It is a garden that needs to be cared for. Be wise about it. Jax smiled even though he was stressed out. Thanks for the tips. Maybe next time you shouldn't build a doomsday machine to send it. 20 hours left. People all over the world looked up at the sky and wondered if tomorrow would come. News reports showed that temporal anomalies were getting worse. Scientists made dark predictions. Parents held their kids close, scared that they would disappear. But inside the containment chamber, something amazing was going on. Jax had become a temporal conductor, directing repairs across many timelines. To someone watching from the outside, his hands moved in ways that looked like seizures, but each movement had a reason over time. He used a method he called temporal harmonics, which meant syncing his own biorhythm with the drive's oscillations. The quantum fluctuations in his heartbeat were in sync. His breathing matched the pulses of time. He became one with the machine, moving with time itself. The repairs were too hard to do. He had to rearrange 73 pairs of quantum entanglements, use a method that involved playing certain frequencies through a modified organ pipe to recalibrate the chronal anchoring system, use controlled microparadoxes that cancel each other out to stabilize the temporal feedback loops, rebuild the master frequency generator using parts from 17 different times. And he had to do it all while living in more than one timeline, with his mind stretched thin over minutes and hours. At the 15th hour he almost lost himself. The stress of time became too much for him, and his sense of linear identity began to fade. He couldn't remember if he was Jax Miller from today or tomorrow. The present became something far away. That's when he took the picture of his parents, which was like a rock in his life. He looked at their smiling faces and thought, I'm Jax Miller, born in 2309. I've loved building things since I was 5. People called me a disgrace, but I never stopped caring. I will fix this impossible machine because people need me to. His sense of self became stronger. The timelines came into focus. Jax did the last and most dangerous repair with new determination. He had to reach into the drive's core and manually change the master chronal oscillator, which was a part of the drive that was only partially in normal spacetime. Touching it would leave him unprotected and open to the full force of the temporal field. Here goes everything, Jax said quietly. He put his hands deep into the drive's heart. Time blew up all around him. He saw everything, from the beginning of the universe to the end of stars, and every moment that had ever happened or would happen. His personal timeline became clear. He saw himself as a child, an old man, and other versions of himself that never existed. He also saw possible futures that went on forever. But he didn't give up. Kept his goal in mind. He held on to the fact that people were counting on him in the real linear world. His fingers found the oscillator. He could feel its broken, chaotic rhythm. He made the change using everything he had learned and every piece of information he had gotten from different timelines. It was the smallest movement, a quarter turn and a minute of recalibration. The universe held its breath. The hum of the temporal drive changed. For 3 long seconds nothing happened. Jax stood there with his hands still in the drive's core, every cell in his body screaming in pain as he wondered if he had failed. After that, the equations on the drive surface started to settle down. The symbols that were all over the place and flickering slowed down, got organized and settled into beautiful patterns. Instead of the violent, erratic pulses, the drive's crystalline structure began to glow with a soft, steady light. Outside the containment chamber, alarms that had been going off for days started to quiet down. Helena ran into the monitoring room, her heart racing. Report on the status. What's going on? The technician at the main console, a veteran named David Park, couldn't believe what he saw on his screens. Temporal variance is going down. We're only 15% off now. 10%. 5. His voice broke with emotion. Dr. Morse, the timeline is getting more stable. People all over the world felt the change before they knew what it meant. Tom Fletcher stood at his office window in New Denver and saw that the flickering had stopped. The building stayed strong. Time moved forward, but only at the right speed. Lisa Chen watched as the old artifacts at the museum settled into their true states. They were old but stable, and their timelines were no longer going through centuries. Dr. Kevin Morris's patient, the woman who had been changing ages, became stable at the age of 32. The records of her medical history stopped changing. She opened her eyes and asked, "What happened?" in a confused voice. Time was good for healing. But Jax had to pay the price inside the containment chamber. He fell down when he took his hands out of the drive's core. His body had been hit by time forces that should have killed him right away. Every cell had different rates of time passing. Some cells aged quickly, some stayed the same, and some even went back in time. Riley Santos, who had been watching from behind a protected window, yelled for the medical team. They ran in wearing suits that protected them from time travel and found Jax unconscious with his vital signs all over the place. "His timeline is out of whack," yelled Dr. Emily Ross, the head doctor. "He's going through temporal shock. We have to get him to stasis right away." They hurried Jax to the medical wing, where a special temporal stasis pod could separate him from the normal flow of time so that his body could get back in sync. Helena stood over the pod with a worried look on her face as they worked. People had called this man a disgrace, but he had just saved the world. But how much? There are 12 hours left until the collapse. But the countdown wasn't scary anymore. The temporal drive was quickly stabilizing, and its repair was spreading through time. The worst of the crisis was over, but it wasn't over yet. Jax's mind drifted through strange places in the stasis pod. He remembered things that weren't his, or maybe they were from other timelines. He saw versions of himself who had never been embarrassed and had become well-known engineers. He saw versions of people who had died young. He saw versions of himself who had taken completely different paths. He also learned the truth about the people who made the drive. They had been human, would be human, or were human in a complicated way. They lived in the far future of humanity, when time travel technology was as common as electricity. They made the drive and sent it back in time, letting it break on purpose because they had learned an important lesson. People couldn't be given time travel technology. They had to work hard, be brave, and give up things to get it. They had been waiting for Jax to be the sacrifice. As his mind began to settle down and reconnect with linear time, Jax understood something deep. The drive hadn't been testing people's technical skills. It had been putting people's character to the test. Would someone please come forward? Would they give up their own lives for others? Would they think outside the box, with love, and in a way that seems impossible? He had said yes. Jax opened his eyes 12 hours later. Helena was next to the stasis pod, and her face showed how relieved she was. "Welcome back," she said in a soft voice. "Did it work?" Jax's voice was rough. "Look for yourself." She helped him get to a window. Outside, the earth turned slowly and peacefully. Cities shone with steady light. No flickering, no changes in time. Time moved as it should, forward, steadily, and for real. Helena said, "The drive is 90% stable. We still have to finish the shutdown sequence, but the schedule is safe. The strange things are going away all over the world." "You did it, Jax." He leaned against the window, feeling too much. "How long was I gone?" 36 hours. "Your body needed time too." She stopped and thought about what to say next. "To remember how to live in linear time." "I'm fine? No lasting harm?" Helena's face became complicated. "That's hard to say. Your cells have changed in a big way. We've never seen temporal mechanics at this level before. To be honest, we don't know what the long-term effects will be." Jax smiled a little. "That's how it goes for me. Do something that seems impossible and deal with the strange results." "Are you able to walk?" "A few thousand people want to say thank you." "About 1,000? Try a few billion." "You are a hero, Jax. People all over the world know what you did." 2 days later, Jax was back in the containment chamber, but this time he had a full support team with him. The drive needed to be turned off for good, and even though the immediate crisis was over, the process of shutting it down had to be done very carefully. Riley worked next to him with 3 other engineers who had been part of the first failed attempts. But now they were in awe of Jax, who had been skeptical before. "The drive doesn't want to turn off," Jax said as he looked over the readings. "It's become semi-sentient because of its link to the temporal substrate. We need to get it to turn off on its own." "Convince a machine?" asked Chris Martinez, one of the engineers. "What do we do?" "By treating it with respect. By saying thank you." Jax walked up to the drive and put his hand on it gently. "This device has given us an amazing gift, a look at what temporal technology could be. But it has also shown us that we aren't ready for it yet." "Not really." He started the shutdown sequence, but not with a simple command. He had planned for it to be a slow release, like how a conversation ends naturally. The drive answered, and its crystal structure slowly and peacefully dimmed. Jax saw something strange while he was working. His hands left behind faint traces as if he were moving through syrup. Time around him was a little stretched. "Jax." Riley saw it too. "Are you all right?" "Yes, I believe the time exposure altered me in some way. I can now feel time like a surface. It's weird, but it doesn't hurt." They carefully untangled the drive from the temporal substrate over the next 6 hours. It was hard work that needed constant changes and recalibrations. One wrong move could set off another chain reaction. But Jax knew how to speak the drive's language. He knew its needs, likes, and rhythms. Like a parent putting a child to sleep, he led it into dormancy. At last, after 7 hours, the temporal drive went dark. The surface of the crystal stopped shining. The equations disappeared from view. The hum that had been there for weeks stopped. Chris said, "Power output 0. Temporal field fell apart. It's finished." The team stood there in awe. They had turned off a device that could have destroyed reality itself. Riley began to cry, but only quietly because she was relieved and tired. Chris laughed so hard that it was almost hysterical. Sarah Kim, another engineer, just sat down on the floor, feeling overwhelmed. Jax felt oddly calm. He touched the now-dead drive one last time as a way to say goodbye and thank you. He could still feel the faint echo of what it had been, a bridge across time, a masterwork of impossible engineering, in his changed mind. What's going to happen to it now? Riley wanted to know. Helena, who had been watching from the observation room, spoke over the radio. "We're moving it to a safe place. People who know what it means will study it very carefully. We might learn how to make our own temporal drive someday when we're ready. But not yet. Not for a long time." Helena held a press conference that night. As she talked about what had happened, the whole world listened. She gave Jax Miller credit for saving humanity from temporal collapse. She said into the cameras, "Jax Miller is a great example of human creativity. When the smartest people we know said something couldn't be done, he found a way. He paid the price without thinking twice when it meant giving up something for himself. We owe him everything." Jax watched from a private room, not liking all the attention. He never wanted to be well known. He just wanted to fix things, solve problems, and get broken systems working again. But he couldn't deny how good it felt. He had been called a disgrace for years, had his methods questioned, and had his license taken away. Now, in the most dramatic way possible, he had been proven right. More importantly, he had proven something to himself. His unusual way of thinking, his willingness to try solutions that seemed impossible, and his refusal to believe that something couldn't be fixed were not flaws. They were just what the world needed. Someone knocked on his door, breaking his train of thought. Helena walked in with papers that looked official. "Your engineering license," she said as she gave him a digital tablet. "Fully reinstated, all records cleared as promised. Plus a few other things like honorary degrees from 4 universities, job offers from every major tech company in the solar system, and a personal thank you from the director of the Temporal Authority." Jax shook his head in disbelief as he looked through the papers. "This is so strange. You've earned it." "Jax, I also wanted to know what you're going to do now." He was surprised when he looked up at her. "I didn't think that far ahead. Maybe you can make it through the next week?" Helena smiled. "When you're ready, we'd like you to head up a new department. Problems that can't be solved. A group of people who are determined to solve problems that everyone else has given up on. You would have complete freedom, unlimited resources, and the power to solve problems however you want." "That sounds..." Jack stopped and thought about it. "That sounds great, actually. But I do have one condition." "Say it." "I pick my own team. Beginning with Riley Santos. That kid has good instincts." "Done." They shook hands and Jax felt like a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He finally had a future that wasn't shaped by mistakes he had made in the past. 3 weeks after the temporal drive was turned off, Jax woke up in his new apartment, which the Temporal Authority had given him. He noticed that time was acting strangely around him. He could see his coffee cup on the table 3 seconds ago and 3 seconds in the future at the same time. His hand left temporal echoes when he reached for it, which meant that there were more than one position at the same time. He called Dr. Emily Ross, the doctor who had seen him after the time exposure. He said, "I think the effects are getting stronger," trying to keep his voice steady. Emily got there in less than an hour with a portable temporal scanner. While Jax tried to stay still, which was hard because his body kept existing in different moments, she ran tests. Emily showed him the results and said, "Your cellular structure has been permanently changed. You're not just living in the present anymore. You're spread out over time by about 5 seconds in either direction. You're like living in a temporal cloud instead of a temporal point." "Is it risky?" "We don't know. You're the first person to go through this much time integration in life. You're one of a kind, Jax." He laughed in a bitter way. "Great. From shame to a medical oddity." But Emily looked like she was thinking. "This could actually be a huge benefit. You can see time in ways that no one else can. You might be able to guess what will happen just before it happens or react to things that haven't happened yet." Jax learned to deal with his new sense of time over the next few weeks. At first it was hard for him to get used to, but he did. He learned that he could indeed feel things happening before they happened, not as a prophecy, but as a practical awareness of what would happen next. He knew seconds before a piece of equipment was going to break down. He heard the words just before someone spoke them. It made him an even better engineer because he could see problems coming and fix them before they happened. But there were also weirder effects. When he touched some things he could see their past, who had held them, where they had been, and what they had seen. He could see the hands of everyone who had ever drunk from a coffee cup. A tool showed who owned it all the way back to when it was made. Riley went to his apartment one night to talk about plans for the new Impossible Problems division. Jax was sitting in the dark, surrounded by floating holographic displays that showed patterns over time. "Are you working late?" she asked. "All the time. Look at this." He pointed and the displays moved. "I've been looking at how stable time is around the world. There are still ripples even though the drive is off. Small changes in how time flows around the world. Is that a bad thing? I don't think so. They're going away and they're not dangerous. But they are interesting. Like footprints in wet concrete, this shows that something important happened here." Riley sat next to him and looked at the patterns. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you feel bad about it? Fixing the drive even though you knew what it did to you?" Jax was quiet for a long time, thinking. He could see different versions of this conversation through his temporal perception. Ones where he said yes, ones where he said no, and ones where he didn't answer the question. But in this timeline he chose to be honest. "No. I don't feel bad about it. Yes, I've changed. I might never be completely normal again. But I saved all of their lives. Everyone who gets to wake up tomorrow and live their life instead of being spread out across collapsing timelines. That's because of what I did. How could I feel bad about that?" "That's what makes you a hero," Riley said in a low voice. "No. In stories, heroes are people. I'm just a lucky engineer." "Fortunate? You almost died, Jax. Your timeline was torn up." "I got to touch something amazing. I got to dance with time, Riley. I saw how things happen and how they are built. Most people go through life without ever realizing how beautiful the world is. I was able to see it. So yes, I'm lucky." Riley smiled and shook her head. "You can't be serious." "Exactly. That's why they gave me the job." The next day, Jax went to the safe place where the temporal drive was now kept. He had asked for access so that he could check on it one last time. The drive was in a vault with climate control and sensors and other monitoring equipment all around it. It looked dead and still, like a ball of strange metal and crystal. But Jax's sense of time allowed him to see something else. The drive wasn't really asleep. In a way, it was dreaming. There were still faint patterns of temporal energy flickering in its core. They were too weak to do anything, but they were there. He put his hand on the surface and felt a rush of information. The drive was talking to him, and his ability to sense time was the link. His mind was full of images. The people who made the drive worked in a shiny lab thousands of years in the future. They are arguing about whether or not to send the drive back in time. They chose to include the test and the planned failure because they knew that only a species that proved itself worthy could be given temporal technology. And one more thing. A message hidden deep in the drive structure, waiting for someone with temporal perception to find it. "Good job, time mechanic. You have shown that people are worthy. When your descendants are ready to build their own temporal drives in 743 years, this device will turn back on and share its secrets. It sleeps until then. Take good care of it." The Temporal Engineering Guild, 3089 CE. Jax was shocked and pulled his hand back. The drive wasn't just a test. It was a present that had to be opened at the right time. The crisis, the failure, and his death were all necessary to show that people deserved this knowledge. And now it would wait, still and patient, for future generations to open it. He smiled and touched the drive again to show respect. "Have a good night. We'll take good care of you." Jax stood at the dedication ceremony for the Impossible Problems Division headquarters 6 months after the temporal crisis. The building was an engineering marvel. Jax had a hand in designing it, and it used ideas he had learned from the temporal drive. Not the technology itself, but the way of thinking about it, finding simple answers to hard problems, making sure that function and form work together, and making sure that technology works with reality instead of against it. Helena spoke to the crowd, which included scientists, engineers, government officials, and reporters from all over the world. She said, "The temporal crisis taught us a lot. It taught us to be humble and that we aren't as advanced as we thought. It taught us to be brave by showing us that heroes can come out of the darkest times. And it gave us hope that no problem is too big to solve if we use our creativity, determination, and heart." She pointed to Jax, who was standing in the spotlight and looking uncomfortable. Jax Miller is a good example of these lessons. He did what other people wouldn't do, saw things that other people couldn't, and succeeded where other people failed. Under his direction, The Impossible Problems Division will take on the problems our world faces with the same spirit of unconventional brilliance. People clapped. Jax walked up to the podium. His sense of time showed him different versions of this moment. Some where he gave a great speech, some where he messed up, and some where he ran off the stage completely. He chose to be honest in this timeline. I don't do well with speeches, he said. I'm better with machines than with people. But I have something important to say. He stopped to think about what he wanted to say. 6 months ago I was a disgrace. My job was over. People asked me about my methods. I lived in a shipping container and survived on coffee and my willpower. Then the world needed me and I got a second chance. But here's the thing, I didn't do it all by myself. Riley Santos helped me and had faith in me when others didn't. Helena Morse fought for me and gave me a chance. The whole support team gave help and protection. And all of you, he pointed to the crowd. You had faith in me. You let an engineer with bad ideas try to do the impossible. So this division isn't just about me. It's for everyone. It's about the belief that we can do anything if we work together, think outside the box, and never give up on something. He grinned. They call me a hero. But I'm just a person who didn't give up. And that's not brave, it's just human. We can all do it. The applause was deafening. Jax showed Riley around their new building after the ceremony. The labs had everything they could need, like high-tech computers, fabrication tools, libraries of technical information, and even musical instruments and old tools. Here you go, Jax said as he led Riley to her new office. Deputy Director of Problems That Can't Be Solved. What do you think? Riley looked around the room. It was bright, modern, and full of possibilities. I believe I need a larger coffee maker. Jax laughed. Already placed an order. Strong enough for industry. They stood together and looked out over New Denver through the windows that went from floor to ceiling. The city shone in the afternoon sun, solid and real, and time moved forward as it should. What's the first problem we can't solve? Riley, she said. Jax brought up a holographic screen. We already have 17 projects lined up. Sustainably changing Mars's environment. Fixing the acidification of the ocean. Making clean fusion that doesn't need temperatures that are impossible. Choose one. How about all of them? Now you're thinking like someone who can't solve a problem. That night, Jax stayed in his new office after everyone else had left. He opened the file on the temporal drive, which was still in its safe vault, still dreaming of the far-off future when it would wake up again. 700 years from now, he thought about the people who built it. They had gone back in time to test their ancestors and make sure that time travel technology would only be available to people who knew how to use it safely. And they had picked him to be their tool. Not because he was the smartest person in the room, there were a lot of people who were smarter. Not because he was the most qualified, by any standard he was the least qualified. They picked him because he thought outside the box. Because he could see solutions when others could only see problems. Because he cared enough to give up his life for people he would never meet. Jax opened a blank document and started to type. A report, a record, a message to the future engineers who would eventually figure out the drive's secrets. Dear Temporal Engineering Guild of 3089, you probably knew I would find your message. Time is strange like that, so maybe you've already read this in your timeline. I want you to know that we're trying hard to be good. We're trying to make the world a better place by learning and growing. We make mistakes, but we keep getting better. I hope that by the time your time comes, we will have proven ourselves 1,000 times. Thanks for the test. Thanks for the present. We appreciate that you thought we could handle it. We promise we won't let you down. Jax Miller, a temporal mechanic, apparently. He saved the file, encrypted it, and sent it to the drive's monitoring system. That message would be waiting for the drive when it woke up. Jax got up and walked to the window. He could see the city at different times, with the past, present, and near future all overlapping. He saw people going about their lives, not knowing how close they were to not being alive anymore. Because of what he did, each of them got to live another day. That thought settled in his chest, warm and strong. Not exactly pride. Something less noisy. Happy. Go. He knew that his life had meant something, that his unique way of thinking and strong will had made a real difference. He was not Jax Miller, the shameful person. He was Jax Miller, the guy who fixed a time-traveling ship and saved the future of humanity. The sun went down over New Denver. Tomorrow would come, just like it always had and always would. Time moved forward, steady and sure, taking people toward whatever problems lay ahead. Jax Miller would be ready when those problems came up and needed to be solved. He smiled at his reflection in the window, which was a reflection that existed in many moments and stretched time itself, forever changed by what he had been through. He told the future, bring on the impossible. We have work to do.